$5.5 billion in deals with India, $10 billion in investment pledges from Australia, a comprehensive strategic partnership with the world's fourth largest economy, Japan. 10 days, 3 countries, 3 continents worth of opportunity, and not a single dollar of it flows through Washington. Mark Carney just completed the most significant trade mission by any Canadian Prime Minister in decades. And the number buried in the India deal alone, 22 million pounds of uranium locked in through 2035, that tells you everything about where Canada is headed. But here's what nobody's reporting: why these 3 countries said yes to Canada right now. And that answer starts with what happened in Davos 6 weeks earlier. If you want to understand these global shifts before they hit the news cycle, subscribe and hit the bell. I break down every move Carney makes. To understand why this trip matters, you need to understand where Canada was 16 months ago. January 2025, Davos, Switzerland. Donald Trump takes the stage virtually and says 6 words that every Canadian business owner heard. We don't need their oil and gas. Not a negotiation, not a threat. A dismissal. He went further, said the US doesn't need Canadian cars, doesn't need Canadian lumber, called us tough to deal with, and then, as if that wasn't clear enough, suggested we should just become the 51st state. Think about what that means for a moment. 97% of Canada's crude oil exports go to one customer, the United States. 4 million barrels a day flowing south. One customer decides they don't want to pay fair prices anymore. One customer decides tariffs are easier than trade. What happens to Fort McMurray? What happens to Sarnia? What happens to the thousands of families whose livelihoods depend on that pipeline staying open? That's the position Canada was in. Not weak, but exposed. Too dependent on a partner who was no longer acting like one. And then there was India. Diplomats expelled. Relations frozen since 2023 over allegations most Canadians never fully understood. A market of 1.4 billion people. The fastest growing major economy on earth. And we weren't even talking to them. So when Carney stepped onto that plane on February 26th, he wasn't just taking a trip. He was testing whether Canada could build a new network from scratch. Now here's the part that changes everything. What he brought back wasn't symbolic. It wasn't handshakes and photo ops. There's a number attached to every stop. And when you add them up, you'll see why this trip will be studied for years. February 27th, Mumbai. Carney lands and goes straight to meet with Indian business leaders. Not politicians, business. He's there to show India that Canada isn't just another country asking for favors. We're bringing something to the table. And here's what most coverage missed. This wasn't a cold start. Behind the scenes, Carney had been rebuilding this relationship since June 2025 when he invited Modi to the G7 summit in Alberta. The high commissioners were reappointed. Quiet conversations happened. By the time Carney landed in Mumbai, the groundwork was done. March 2nd, New Delhi, Hyderabad House. Carney and Modi sit down for 35 minutes one-on-one, then 90 minutes with their full delegations. And when they walk out, they announce something nobody expected. A pathway to a comprehensive free trade agreement by December. But that's not the headline. The headline is Cameco. Saskatchewan's uranium giant just locked in a $2.6 billion contract, 22 million pounds of uranium flowing to India from 2027 to 2035. India has 24 nuclear reactors running today. They're building toward 100 gigawatts of nuclear power by 2047. And Canada just became their fuel supplier for the next decade. That uranium runs through 2035. Think about that timeline for a second. That's not a handshake. That's a legal framework. That's Saskatchewan jobs locked in for 9 years. Then Australia, March 3rd through 5th. Carney flies to Sydney and becomes the first Canadian Prime Minister to address both houses of Australian Parliament in nearly 20 years. And the announcement that came out of Canberra, Australia's IFM Investors, one of the largest pension funds in the world, pledges up to $10 billion in Canadian investment over the next decade. Infrastructure, airports, energy. But there's a defense piece nobody's talking about. Canada is buying Australia's over-the-horizon radar system. It bounces signals off the ionosphere and detects threats 3,000 kilometers out. Canadian forces will start training on it in Australia by mid-2026. That's Arctic security. The thing NORAD has been waiting for. March 6th, Tokyo. Final stop. Carney meets Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae, Japan's first female prime minister, and they sign a comprehensive strategic partnership: defense, energy, critical minerals, LNG exports. Japan is the fourth largest economy in the world. 70% of all cars manufactured in Canada are made by Japanese companies. This wasn't a courtesy call, this was cementing the foundation. So let's add this up. $5.5 billion in commercial agreements from India, uranium, pharmaceuticals, AI centers, agricultural partnerships, $10 billion in pledged investment from Australia, a comprehensive strategic partnership with Japan anchoring nearly $40 billion in bilateral trade, critical minerals alliances, defense cooperation, Arctic radar systems, 10 days, 3 countries, a new network. And here's why this doesn't reverse. The uranium contract runs through 2035. You don't cancel that with a phone call. The radar system takes years to deploy. Canadian forces are already scheduled to train in Australia by mid-2026. Australia just joined Canada's G7 Critical Minerals Alliance. That's infrastructure being built right now, supply chains being rewired. And the trade agreement with India? Both governments are targeting December. If that happens, Canada gains preferential access to 1.4 billion consumers, the fastest growing major economy on Earth. A country told it could become the 51st state just proved it doesn't need to. That's not a headline. That's a structural shift. Supply chains that reroute don't return. Markets that shift don't shift back. Defense alliances that form don't dissolve because someone in Washington changes their mind. What Carney built in 10 days is a network, and networks, once they exist, tend to grow. Think about what the world looked like for Canada 2 years ago. One customer for our oil, one partner for our trade, one relationship that defined our economy. That world is ending, not because we wanted it to, but because we had no choice. Now, Canada has options. India wants our uranium. Australia wants our partnership. Japan wants our energy. And none of them are asking us to become a state. If you think more Canadians should understand what just happened, tap the like button. It pushes this to more people who need to see it. The algorithm listens. So where does this go next? Carney just landed in Norway to watch NATO exercises. Then the UK. The network keeps expanding. And the trade agreement negotiations with India, those are happening right now with a deadline of December, but the foundation is already poured. Critical minerals partnerships with Australia, defense cooperation with Japan, energy agreements across the Indo-Pacific. Here's my question for you. Which of these 3 partnerships do you think matters most for Canada's future, India, Australia, or Japan? I want to hear your reasoning. Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every single one. You know, there's a phrase Carney used in Australia that stuck with me. He said, "In a world of great power rivalry, middle powers have a choice. Compete for favor or combine for strength. That's the strategy. Not begging Washington for exemptions. Not hoping the tariffs go away. Building something new with countries who actually want to work with us. The uranium runs through 2035. The radar system goes online in 2026. The investment pledges are being deployed right now. And every single one of those commitments was made by countries who chose Canada. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. 10 days, 3 countries, $15 billion, and a new map of who Canada's real partners are. If you want to understand how we got here, why Modi said yes, why Australia came back to the table, why Japan doubled down, I broke down Carney's Davos speech in detail. That video is right here. I'll see you there.